Another month and another truckload of roguelikes, roguelites, roguish games out there for us to try and sift through. Now, unfortunately, I do have another full-time job that pays for bills and games and food and other things that are not strictly video game related, but still important. And that means that I can't review every single game out there. So instead of trying to just focus on the games from the previous month, we'll cover recent games. That way, if, like happened this month, there's games that I happen to have missed in the previous month or so, we can still get back around to them. And, well, Spelunky 2 just released, and I am not covering that in this episode. We'll cover that next time. But anyways, this episode we actually have 4 games to go through. 2 were in this last month, 1 was August, and 1 was earlier in the summer. But at least every game we're going to go through here today is in the worth considering or better category, so that's something. So don't go anywhere, because these are definitely games that you do not want to sleep on. We're going to take things chronologically by release date. The first game up is Colt Canyon. If I had to pigeonhole this game, I'd call it an Isaac-like or a Gungeon-like, or probably closer to a Nuclear Throne-like, so a Throne-like? Well, maybe not, but you get the idea. But let's not pigeonhole it, as doing so would be to overlook all that this game has to offer. As a side note, where does the phrase pigeonholing even come from? Colt Canyon was released on June 16th, developed by Retrific and published by Head Up. You can pick it up on Steam, GOG, Switch, and the Xbox. Sorry PlayStation fans, not for you this time. The story is rather simple. You're trying to save your partner, and you have to get through areas of increasing enemy difficulty to do so. Pretty cut and dry. At least they didn't spend time trying to reinvent the wheel on that. Rescue a friend from ambiguously evil enemy? Check. From the trailer and from the gameplay here, it looks like having all of the sprites be in the same washed out aesthetic as your character would make things more difficult to see what's going on. But it actually is pretty easy to follow. I was never at the point where I wasn't sure where I was, even during the chaotic boss fights. Each area is split into 3 levels, I guess you'd say, and in each level there's a person who you will rescue. This person offers you varying stat upgrades or the offer to have them fight alongside you. You can potentially have a little army of followers at your side, but of course choosing that option will leave you in a weaker or under-leveled state, so there's more than one way to make a build, which is always a good sign of a roguelike. My main complaint, and it is one that unfortunately casts a shadow on my whole experience, is that you are constantly out of ammo. This game makes Nuclear Throne and Gungeon feel like you have an endless supply of ammunition. It takes a page from Nuclear Throne directly, though, when it comes to the different ammunition types and various guns that will share these ammunition types. And you can only hold 2 guns at one time. And honestly, I really like this convention for bullet hell games. But the characters tend to not drop many bullets, and it takes often more bullets to shoot them down than you end up finding. Clearly the game was designed to rely heavily on a melee and stealth system, which is honestly a bit tacked onto the game. When an enemy doesn't notice you, you can usually take them out with a single melee strike or with significantly fewer bullets. Once an enemy is on alert or sees you outright, which are both separate statuses, they are harder to take down. This stealth combination feels just a bit out of place with the rest of the mechanics in the game. This is a Western after all, not a ninja game. I want to use guns and shoot them up, not sneak around like Snake. All that aside, I rate this game a solid worth considering. It's a fun playthrough with the varying playstyles and unlocks to keep the game fresh as you go along. If it weren't for the ammo management alongside the forced stealth, I'm sure I'd be picking it up more often and definitely would have rated it higher. August had a release of a game that we didn't talk about in the September edition, and that edition was kind of full anyways, but I don't want to forget about this game, Spirit's Abyss. This I would classify as a Spelunky-like, or Lunky-like, if you will, and that's just because it's a straight-up inspired by a true story, if the true story were Spelunky. There's no denying the influence, but Spirit's Abyss is a game on its own. The story is that you're a child who was cast down into wherever you are, and there's a legend that a child thrown down will recover a book which will give them the power over death. No, seriously, that's the story. Your family just chucks you down into a well for you to hopefully not die. It's the all-American family feel-good story of the summer. But Spirit's Abyss was released on October 27th after spending some time in early access. Developed by Anthony Case, published by Caseware, and is available on Steam. After getting chucked into the pit, you platform your way down to the bottom of each stage, pick up money and bombs and power-ups and items along the way, or you can buy stuff from a shopkeeper or kill said shopkeeper if you'd like. Now see, I told you, this is basically Spelunky. But between each level, your family contacts you via phone. Now don't think about how the phone gets down there after all, but they'll offer you an upgrade or a status item, and eventually you'll... and that's the end. There are things that do diverge from Spelunky other than it being a completely different art style, which I personally really enjoy. You can start as different characters who have different combat styles. The default character has a short-range, weak gun. There's also a character with a sword, and I'm sure there are more, I just have no idea how to unlock them myself. There are a lot of different areas and complexities, and some boss areas that I frankly just can't figure out. Pretty sure that in this boss room, I'd unlock a character, but I get one shot every time I go in there. Now, my only real complaint about the game is a lack of focus. There are 2 modes to the basic game, not counting the daily challenge, and they look identical to the untrained eye, or to the eye that has less than 10 hours in the game in my case. And there's a completely tacked on and unnecessary card game, which is a mix between the card game in Final Fantasy IX and Hearthstone, but not in a good kind of mashup way. It's in the why the f is this a thing kind of way. I don't understand why games do this. You have a good game going, stop adding on extra things. Focus on making the core mechanics of the game better, like the aiming system, which is frankly atrocious. That, no, I should have mentioned this earlier, is a real downside. I end up taking damage and dying not because I don't know what to do, but because it's a ridiculous input attack system which takes into consideration your left joystick movement for the direction of your attack. You will rarely aim at the thing you're aiming for, and a stupid simple bat will probably end you. That's really a shame. This just feels like your hands and weapons do their own thing, which is not what you want in this type of a game that requires a bit more precision. Now, all that said, this game I'd place into the must-play category for fans of Spelunky. It has enough of its own charm that even with some of the limitations in the combat and lack of focus, still has the replayability that you would look for in a Lunky-like of any kind. The next 2 games released on the same day, so we're gonna have to go alphabetically, I guess? Okay, Atomicrops, that means it's your turn. I can definitively say this is the first bullet hell farming simulator that I've ever played. I mean, who even thought this would be a good idea? Stardew Valley meets Enter the Gungeon? You know what though? It works better than you'd think. This game is a delightful mashup of 2 games who have 0 cross-category recommendations on Steam. Atomicrops was first released on the 17th of September by Birdbath Games, published by Raw Fury. It also spent some time in early access, and you can pick it up pretty much anywhere on Steam, Epic, Switch, Xbox, or the PlayStation. Right out of the gate with this game, there's a lot going on. Let me take you through a quick rundown of the intended gameplay loop. You start out your run in the spring, of which each season in spring has 3 days, FYI. You've got your little plot of land. You take your gun during the day to neighboring areas and fight monsters to earn seeds, pigeons, items, and more. Around nightfall, which is about 2 minutes later, you head back to your farm to plant the seeds you have and defend your farm from incoming rodents, rabbits, and vermin who will want to eat your plants and shoot you at the same time. You have to prep the ground, till the soil, plant the plants, fertilize the plants, then give them water so they can grow, then harvest the plants once they're grown. Fortunately, there's this happy bouncing up and down animation once they're fully grown. It's actually nice that I've included an obvious animation that the plants are harvestable. And then you rinse and repeat. Oh, and also shoot off the monsters. At the end of the night, a helicopter arrives to take you into town where you can buy weapons, which only last for 1 day, buy seeds, give roses you've grown to new friends in town, who eventually you can marry if you give them enough roses, then your spouse will fight with you, but once all your shopping is done, you then head back to your farm for day 2 of spring. Rinse and repeat. Nightfall of day 3 brings a boss to your farm, defeat that boss, and there's an end of season celebration award with status upgrades and bonus items, all depending upon how well your crops did that season. Hooray! And then you do it all again for the next season. Just gotta make it through spring, summer, fall, and winter, all of which get harder along the way, and then you go on to the final boss, who I won't show for spoilers' sake. But even at the end of the game, even if you beat that boss and unlock year 2, there's still a lot where you wonder if there was maybe a way you could have done it differently or better, or arranged your crops differently, or any number of things. It definitely leaves you wanting to play the game again. The only downside for me, and I know this isn't a downside for everyone, is the game does offer very generous permanent upgrades from the rewards you get at the end of each season. These offer seed bonuses, item bonuses, etc., which don't really tie into the game other than to give you bonuses, I guess, in the runs going forward. I'm not a huge fan of persistent upgrades for the persistent upgrades' sake, and unfortunately, that's what this is. There's no story or lore reasons as to why you now get these upgrades. You just do. But somehow, it does manage to stay fun. Sadly, as a bullet hell game, it's subpar. The enemy patterns are utterly avoidable, even at the higher difficulty. The bosses are easy, including the final boss, so you just need to understand how to damage him first. The charm in the game comes from the combination of the two genres, but as such really isn't going to appeal to lovers of either genre on its own. But if you're in the market for that Gungeon Stardew crossover, then this would become a must-play. For me, this remains solidly in the worth considering category. Really enjoyable, but not more than a niche pickup really. Big pause here. Our last game for the October edition. Wow. Hades. Just go get this game. I'm serious. As you can see, I've paused the video. I'll wait here for you to get back. You gotta go buy it. Okay. Welcome back. You good? It's downloading now? Yes? Alright. Well, the game might take a little bit to download, so I'll make this quick so that you can play the game as soon as it's done installing. Hades is exactly what you would hope for if Supergiant decided to make a roguelike, because, well, that's what they did. That's what this is. For those of you who don't know Supergiant, and it's okay if you don't, they made Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre before this. The first two are two of my all-time favorite games. Quick stats on Hades was released on September 17th after spending about a year in early access. It was developed and published by Supergiant Games and can be picked up on Steam, the Epic Store, or Switch as of right now. Basic gameplay is that you are Zagreus, who is the son of Hades, who has decided to escape the underworld and find his relatives and live with them on Mount Olympus. I will not spoil any of the story here for you. If you've played the game a few runs, then you know Zag's motivation shifts slightly as he learns a few things, but no spoilers. Anyways, you fight your way out of the realms of the underworld and you will die. And when you die, you get sent back to the House of Hades to try again, because that's where you go when you die. I love it when a roguelike actually has a mechanic or a story built around what happens when you die. It's so refreshing. It keeps you in the game. It's 100% part of the gameplay loop and the lore of the story. It's easy to get sucked into not realizing you're doing run after run because it just feels like you're progressing the game. Alright, now let's talk about the combat style. The best way to describe it is that it's as fluid as Dead Cells, but in a top-down. You have 6 weapons to choose at the start of each run. Well, I mean, you have to unlock some of those, that's why I hesitated, but there are 6 weapons total. And then there are keepsakes that you can equip as modifiers to your run, and then each weapon that you use actually has different aspects that provide a different varied playstyle when using each weapon. It's got a ton of variety before you even start on your run. But then as you traverse the underworld, you pick up boons from the gods on Olympus. This is how your build gets broken. These are status upgrades to your attacks or your dash. They synergize with each other, and this makes each run that you have completely unique, even when you're trying to go for the same type of build each time. The story and the flow of the game is also top-notch. If you're familiar with Supergiant, this is no surprise. This is possibly the most intricate and layered story they've done yet. Actions that you take in the game well into doing many runs still pop new dialogue and interactions with the characters in the game. The voice acting is spot on, and the soundtrack... Okay, the soundtrack. Darren Korb is a genius, as usual, with the soundtrack, which you should just buy and listen to on its own. If, for whatever reason, you didn't purchase the game when I paused the video last time, then when you do go buy it after this video, buy it with the soundtrack as a bundle, or buy it separately. The fantastic Mr. Korb also, by the way, does the voice acting of Zagreus, the main character, and Skelly, who you'll love when you meet Skelly, but he does both of those and a few others as well. And you know what? No apologies here. I'm straight up a fanboy for Darren. At this point, I will literally buy any game he composes the music for just for the soundtrack. It helps that the soundtrack being so good isn't outshining the rest of the game. It's actually amazing that it's that way. It's a fully polished top tier game from start to finish. Not that I'm anywhere close to putting it down, nor anywhere close to being done with this game. The only downside, if I have to pick one, is that it does use a permanent upgrade system. But this one, much like the one in Dead Cells, I don't mind as much. The upgrade system is built into the game and has lore and a reason behind it, and there's actually conversation relating to how you are getting your upgrades built into the game. It's not a tacked on system to help players toward the end of the game. In fact, the game actually has a few different difficulty curves, so that you unlock permanent upgrades at a decent rate while you're new to the game, but then once you do something spoiler related for the game, I'm not going to tell you now, the game starts then to increase the difficulty on its own again, which then takes back any perceived game-induced progression back to you having to just get better at the game. So you get a bit of a boost while you're learning, but they can get smacked right back down once you are fully comfortable with the mechanics of the game. It's a brilliant system, and one that I hope I see more and more roguelites adopt. The difficulty system, referred to as Heat in the game, is a hat tip to the boss system in Dead Cells, but this is much more fluid and leaves the player in more control, as they are forced to choose how the game will increase in difficulty on the subsequent run. This, again, is just brilliant, allowing the player to be more in control with the difficulty increase where they feel they can handle, instead of just taking all of your health regeneration away while simultaneously increasing enemy strength or something like that. It's so very well done. I am actually in love with this progression system. So not a downside at all. I take it back, not a downside. It actually makes this game better, which is great. Now, I can't say much more about this game, but only because I promised to never spoil a game here on this channel. It's just good. This game actually gets my top rating of All-Star. It's that good. If you've been on the fence before, just go get it. I promise you won't regret it. And with that, another edition of New Roguelikes is in the books. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments if there's anything that you agreed or disagree with. I would absolutely love to hear that. Also, if you are new here, please do subscribe so that you can see when new videos come out. Also, you're welcome to join me in my community Discord, Rogue HQ, hang out with fellow roguelike lovers of all shapes and sizes. And if you're still watching, then thank you for sticking with me to the end. I do appreciate you. And until next time, please take care.